Ever feel like you're wrestling a hydra? You know that complex project where every time you solve one problem, two more pop up?
Oh, definitely. Drowning in details, trying to keep things moving efficiently. It's tough.
Exactly. And you just need the core insights, like right now. Well, that's what we're doing today. We're diving deep into Scrum.
Right. And Scrum, you could think of it as a way to tame that hydra, maybe. It's a framework developed by Ken Schwaber and Jeff Sutherland.
The guys who literally wrote the book on it?
Yeah, precisely. It's designed to help people, teams, whole organizations actually, tackle those complex problems and, generate real value through adaptive solutions.
For this deep dive, we're going straight to the source. We've got the official 2020 Scrum Guide right here from Schwaber and Sutherland, and we're also pulling info from scrumguides.org.
The official stuff.
Exactly. So our mission for you, the listener, is pretty straightforward. We want to pull out the essential principles, the structure of Scrum, straight from the creators. No fluff, no jargon overload.
Just the core ideas.
Consider it your shortcut to really getting what Scrum is about.
Okay, so at its heart, Scrum is deliberately lightweight. That's a key thing to grasp.
Lightweight.
Meaning it gives you the essentials, the necessary structure, but it doesn't prescribe every single step. It's not a methodology in that sense, more like scaffolding.
Okay, got it. So practically speaking, how does it actually, work on the ground? Can we break it down?
Yeah, let's try. You can think of it in maybe four main steps that repeat. First, you've got the product owner.
Right.
They figure out all the work needed for the product, prioritize it, and put it into what's called the product backlog.
Okay, step one, order the work.
Step two, the Scrum team, that's the product owner, a Scrum Master, and the developers, they pull a chunk of that work from the top of the backlog.
A manageable chunk.
Exactly. And they turn that into a real usable piece of the product, an increment, during a fixed time period called a sprint.
So plan, then build something concrete.
Then step three, the team, and often key stakeholders, they look at what was built, inspect the increment, see how things are going, and figure out if adjustments are needed.
Check the results.
And step four, repeat. Do it all again in the next sprint. Plan, build, check, adapt. It's a cycle.
A cycle. Okay, that makes sense, but you said it's purposefully incomplete. Why leave things out? Wouldn't more detail be better?
That's where the genius, or at least the core idea lies.
Yeah.
Scrum gives you the rules of the game, the roles, the events, the artifacts, the essentials, but how you specifically implement things within that framework, that's left up to the intelligence of the people doing the work. It trusts the team.
So it relies on the team's expertise and their specific context.
Exactly. It guides how people interact and collaborate, but not what specific techniques or processes they must use beyond the core Scrum framework itself.
Okay, a framework, not a rigid process. I like that.
Mhm.
So what's it built on? What are the underlying ideas?
It really comes down to two main things.
Yeah.
Empiricism and lean thinking.
Empiricism. Sounds a bit academic.
Maybe a little, but the idea is simple. It just means knowledge comes from experience, and you make decisions based on what you observe. You try something, see what happens, and adjust.
Learning by doing.
Pretty much. And lean thinking. That's all about reducing waste and focusing effort only on what's essential, what actually adds value, streamlining.
Got it. Experience and efficiency. How do those actually show up in a team's day-to-day work with Scrum?
Well, through Scrum's iterative and incremental approach, iterative means you work in those cycles, the sprints.
Right, the repeating steps we talked about.
And incremental means that in each cycle, you produce a finished, usable piece of the product, an increment that adds to the previous ones.
So you're constantly building and improving piece by piece.
Exactly. And doing it this way, in these short cycles, helps manage the unpredictability of complex work. You get regular chances to inspect progress and adapt your plan, which controls risk. You don't go too far down the wrong path.
Okay, and the Scrum Guide mentions specific formal events inside each sprint. Are these connected to that empiricism idea?
Absolutely. Those four events, sprint planning, the daily scrum, the sprint review, and the sprint retrospective, they are the built-in formal opportunities for inspection and adaptation.
So the events are the moments you apply the theory.
Precisely. They structure the empiricism, making sure it actually happens. They're linked directly to the three pillars of empiricism that Scrum stands on.
Okay, pillars. Let's break those down. Pillar one is transparency.
Yes, transparency. This means the process, The work, the challenges, everything significant needs to be visible to everyone involved, both those doing the work and those receiving it.
So no hidden agendas or secret progress reports.
Ideally, none. Key decisions are based on the state of the three main artifacts, we'll get to those later, the product backlog, sprint backlog, and the increment. If those aren't transparent, if people have different understandings of what they mean,
Then decisions are flawed.
exactly. Low transparency clouds judgment, diminishes value, and definitely increases risk. You need to see clearly to steer effectively.
Makes sense. If you can't see the problems, you can't fix them.
Which leads nicely to Pillar 2, inspection.
Right. It's not enough for things to be visible. You actually have to look at them. The Scrum artifacts and the progress towards the agreed-upon goals need to be inspected frequently and diligently.
Diligently, meaning paying close attention.
Yes. To detect any undesirable variances or problems early on, the Scrum events we mentioned, they provide the cadence, the regular rhythm for this inspection. The daily Scrum, for example, is a daily inspection of progress toward the sprint goal.
Okay, see it then, check it. And the third pillar, adaptation, must follow from that inspection, right?
Logically, yes. If the inspection reveals that something's off course, maybe one aspect of the process isn't working or the product being built isn't acceptable, then an adjustment has to be made.
And quickly, I assume.
As soon as possible, yeah.
Yeah.
To minimize any further deviation or problems. And the guide points out that teams that are self-managing are better positioned to adapt quickly because they have the authority to make changes. Transparency, inspection, adaptation, the three legs of the empirical stool.
It's a good way to put it. But there's more foundational stuff too, the Scrum values.
Ah, yes, the 5 values. How do they fit in?
They're sort of the glue or maybe the lubricant that makes the pillars work effectively. They guide the team's behavior, their actions, their mindset. They're crucial.
Okay, what are they?
Commitment, focus, openness, respect, and courage.
Right. Could you give us the quick version of what each means in practice?
Sure. Commitment is about the team members being personally dedicated to achieving the team's goals and supporting each other.
All in.
Focus means concentrating on the sprint's work to make the best possible progress towards the goals. Minimizing distractions.
These are focus.
Openness is about the team and its stakeholders being transparent about the work and any challenges they face. No hiding problem.
Being straight with each other.
Respect means team members value each other as capable, independent individuals with diverse skills and experiences.
Valuing the team.
And courage. This is a big one. Having the courage to do the right thing, to work on tough problems and to challenge the status quo when needed. Like having the courage to say, this isn't working early on.
Okay. Commitment, focus, openness, respect, courage. It sounds like living these values would naturally lead to more transparency, better inspection, and easier adaptation.
You nailed it. When the team and the organization embody these values, the pillars of empiricism come alive. It builds trust, which is, absolutely fundamental for any high-performing team.
Okay, so we have the theory, the pillars, the values. Now, who actually does all this? Let's talk about the Scrum team.
Right, the Scrum team. It's the fundamental unit in Scrum. Think of it as a small, cohesive group of professionals.
How small is small?
Typically 10 or fewer people. The guide is pretty specific about that. Small enough to communicate effectively and stay nimble, but large enough to complete significant work within a sprint.
And who's in this team?
It consists of one Scrum Master, one product owner, and the developers. And critically, there are no sub-teams or hierarchies within the Scrum team. It's one team focused on one objective at a time, the product goal.
No managers within the team then?
Nope. They are self-managing. They decide internally who does what, when, and how.
And what makes them effective?
2 key characteristics. They are cross-functional, meaning they collectively have all the skills needed to create value each sprint.
So designers, testers, coders, ops people, maybe, all in one team.
Potentially, yes. Whatever skills are needed to produce a working increment. And second, as I mentioned, they're self-managing, meaning they choose how best to accomplish their work, rather than being directed by others outside the team.
That autonomy seems important.
It's vital for agility and adaptation. And if a team gets too big, say over 10 people, the guide suggests reorganizing into multiple cohesive Scrum teams, each focus on the same product. They'd share the same product goal, product backlog, and product owner.
Okay. And what's the team collectively responsible for?
The entire Scrum team is accountable for creating a valuable, useful increment every single sprint. The buck stops with the team as a whole.
You mentioned 3 specific accountabilities inside the team: developers, product owner, Scrum Master. Let's unpack those. Starting with the developers. Who counts as a developer in Scrum? It's not just coders, is it?
No, absolutely not. That's a common misconception. In Scrum, developers are the people on the Scrum team who are committed to creating any aspect of a usable increment each sprint.
So it could be engineers, designers, testers, writers, data scientists, anyone making the product.
Exactly. Anyone hands-on in building the increment. Their main job, their accountability, is delivering that usable increment.
And what else are they accountable for specifically?
Well, they create the plan for the sprint backlog. They instill quality by adhering to something called the definition of done. They adapt their plan each day towards the sprint goal that happens in the daily scrum. And importantly, they hold each other accountable as professionals.
Okay, clear. Next up, the product owner. What's their focus?
The product owner, or PO, is primarily accountable for maximizing the value of the product that results from the Scrum team's work. It's a big strategic responsibility.
Maximizing value. How do they do that?
Mainly through effective management of the product backlog. This includes developing and clearly communicating the overall product goal.
The long-term vision.
Right. Then creating and communicating the individual product backlog items. Ordering those items based on value, risk, dependencies, whatever makes sense to maximize value delivery. And ensuring the product backlog is transparent, visible, and understood by everyone.
Can they delegate some of that backlog work?
They can delegate the work involved, sure, but they remain accountable for it. And for the PO to succeed, the entire organization has to respect their decisions as reflected in the backlog and the goals. The product owner is one person, by the way, not a committee.
One person representing many stakeholders' needs, presumably.
Exactly. A challenging but crucial role.
Okay, and the third, accountability. The Scrum Master. What's their deal? They're not the boss.
Yeah,
Really.
definitely not the boss. The Scrum Master is accountable for establishing Scrum as it's defined in the Scrum Guide. They help everyone, the team, the PO, the wider organization, understand Scrum theory and practice.
So like a coach or facilitator.
Very much so. They're accountable for the Scrum team's effectiveness. They enable the team to improve its practices within the Scrum framework. Think of them as a servant leader.
Serving who?
Serving the Scrum team in several ways. Coaching them in self-management and cross-functionality, helping them focus on creating high-value increments that meet the definition of done, causing the removal of impediments to the team's progress.
Clearing roadblocks?
Yep, and ensuring that all the Scrum events take place and are positive, productive, and kept within their time limits.
And do they serve the product owner too?
Yes. They help the PO find techniques for effective product goal definition and product backlog management. They help them understand the need for clear backlog items, facilitate stakeholder collaboration when needed, and help establish empirical product planning.
What about the organization outside the team?
Good question. The Scrum Master serves the organization too. By leading and coaching the organization in its Scrum adoption, planning Scrum implementations, helping employees and stakeholders understand and enact an empirical approach for complex work, and removing barriers between stakeholders and the Scrum teams.
So a coach, facilitator, impediment remover, and change agent all rolled into one.
That's a pretty good summary, yeah.
Okay, we understand the team roles. Now, how is their work structured over time? Let's get into the Scrum events.
Right. The events provide the structure. The sprint itself is like the container for all the other events.
Container.
Yeah, all the work happens within sprints. And each event within the sprint is a formal chance to inspect and adapt the Scrum artifacts. They're designed specifically to enable that crucial transparency and empirical process control.
And the guide says if you don't run these events properly,
You lose the opportunity. You lose the benefits of Scrum, basically. These events create regularity and minimize the need for other undefined meetings. And consistency helps, so ideally they happen at the same time and place to reduce complexity.
Okay, let's start with the big container. The sprint. You called it the heartbeat of Scrum earlier. Why?
Because that's where ideas are turned into actual value. It's a fixed-length event, the guide says, 1 month or less to ensure consistency. A new sprint starts immediately after the previous one concludes. No gaps.
Continuous flow.
Exactly. And all the work needed to achieve the product goal happens within sprints. That includes sprint planning, daily scrums, the development work itself, the sprint review, and the sprint retrospective. They all happen inside the sprint.
Are there rules for what happens during a sprint?
Yes, a few key ones. No changes are made that would endanger the sprint goal. Quality doesn't decrease. You don't cut corners on quality to meet the goal. The product backlog gets refined as needed, and the scope. That can be clarified and renegotiated between the PO and developers as more is learned.
So there's stability in the goal, but flexibility in the plan.
That's the idea. Sprints enable predictability by ensuring inspection and adaptation happen at least every calendar month. The guide warns that longer sprints can increase risk and complexity, while shorter sprints generate more learning cycles and limit risk exposure. Think of each sprint as a short project, really.
Can a sprint ever be canceled?
Yes, but it's rare. Only the product owner has the authority to cancel a sprint, and only if the sprint goal becomes obsolete, like if market conditions drastically change or the company direction shifts fundamentally.
Okay. So inside the sprint, the first event is sprint planning. What's the objective here?
Sprint planning kicks off the sprint. It's where the team lays out the work to be performed for the sprint. It's a collaborative session for the entire Scrum team.
Who leads it?
Well, the product owner ensures attendees are ready to discuss the most important product backlog items and how they map to the product goal. The whole team collaborates. They might even invite others, like technical experts, for advice.
And what questions does sprint planning answer?
Primarily three. First, why is this sprint valuable? The PO proposes how the product could increase its value in this sprint. The team then collaborates to define a specific sprint goal.
The why.
Second, what can be done this sprint? The developers select items from the product backlog to include in the current sprint. They discuss this with the PO. They need to feel confident they can complete the selected work.
Wait, what?
And third, how will the chosen work get done? The developers plan the work necessary to create an increment that meets the definition of done. This often involves decomposing backlog items into smaller tasks for the days ahead. The how is owned by the developers.
So the output is the plan for the sprint.
Yes. The result of sprint planning is the sprint backlog. It contains the sprint goal, the why, the set of product backlog items selected for the sprint, the what, and the actionable plan for delivering the increment, the how.
How long does this take?
It's time-boxed. Maximum 8 hours for a 1-month sprint. Shorter sprints usually mean shorter sprint planning.
Okay, plan set. Then comes the daily scrum, right?
Review.
The 15-minute one.
That's the one. Its purpose is purely for the developers to inspect their progress toward the sprint goal and to adapt the sprint backlog, their plan for the upcoming day.
Just 15 minutes.
Every day.
Yep. Same time, same place ideally. Every working day of the sprint. It keeps things concise and routine. It's for the developers. The Scrum Master or MPO only participate if they are also working on sprint backlog items as developers.
And what do they talk about? The classic, what I did yesterday, what I'll do today, any blocks.
That's a common structure, but the guide actually says the developers can select whatever structure they want, as long as it focuses on progress toward the sprint goal and produces an actionable plan for the next day. It's their meeting to optimize their collaboration.
So the focus is on the goal and the plan, not just status reporting.
Exactly. It improves communication, helps identify impediments quickly, promotes fast decision-making, and generally eliminates the need for lots of other meetings. It's a key synchronization point.
But it's not the only time they can adjust their plan. Oh, definitely not. Developers collaborate and replan throughout the day as needed. The daily scrum is just the formal check-in point.
Got it. Fast forward to near the end of the sprint. What's the sprint review about?
The sprint review is about inspecting the outcome of the sprint and figuring out future adaptations. The Scrum team presents the result of their work, the increment, to key stakeholders.
So, show and tell.
It can feel like that sometimes, but it's meant to be much more. It's a working session. The team and stakeholders review what was accomplished and review how the marketplace or product context might have changed.
So looking outward as well as inward.
Yes. Based on that shared understanding, everyone collaborates on what to do next. This feedback might lead to adjustments in the product backlog for future sprints. It's about collaboration and feedback, not just a demo.
How long is the review?
Time-boxed again, maximum 4 hours for a 1-month sprint, and usually shorter for shorter sprints. It's the second to last event.
And the very last event, the sprint retrospective. What happens there?
The retrospective is the team's opportunity to inspect itself and create a plan for improvements for the next sprint. Its purpose is to plan ways to increase quality and effectiveness.
So looking back at how they worked, not just what they produced.
Exactly. The Scrum team inspects how the last sprint went regarding individuals, interactions, processes, tools, and their definition of done. They talk about what went well, what problems they ran into, and how those problems were or weren't solved.
Learning from experience.
That's the core of it. They identify the most helpful changes to improve their effectiveness, and the most impactful improvements might even be added to the next sprint backlog to ensure they happen. It's about continuous improvement.
Time box for this one.
Max 3 hours for a 1-month sprint, shorter for shorter sprints. It concludes the sprint cycle.
Okay, sprint planning, daily scrum, sprint review, sprint retrospective, all within the sprint container. Makes sense. Now, you mentioned artifacts earlier, the things that provide transparency. Let's dive into those.
Right, the Scrum Artifacts. There are 3. The Product Backlog, the Sprint Backlog, and the Increment. They represent work or value. Their main job is to maximize the transparency of key information.
So everyone sees the same picture.
That's the goal. And to make sure that transparency leads to effective inspection and adaptation, each artifact has a commitment associated with it. These commitments provide clarity and focus.
Okay, let's take them one by one. First, the product backlog. We touched on this. It's the list of everything for the product.
Pretty much, it's the emergent, ordered list of what's needed to improve the product. It's the single source of work undertaken by the Scrum team.
Emergent, meaning it changes.
Constantly. It's never complete until the product is retired. As the team learns more, as the market changes, the backlog evolves. Items near the top, ready for upcoming sprints, are usually more refined. Yeah, product backlog refinement is the ongoing process of adding detail, order, and size estimates to items, breaking down big items into smaller ones. It's something the team does continuously, not just in one meeting. The developers are responsible for sizing the items.
And the commitment for the product backlog.
That's the product goal. The product goal describes a future state of the product, serving as a target for the Scrum team to plan against. It's the long-term objective. The rest of the product backlog emerges to define what will fulfill that product goal. You focus on one product goal at a time.
Okay, long-term vision. Product goal. Next artifact. Sprint backlog.
Right. The sprint backlog is composed of 3 things. The sprint goal, the why for this specific sprint, the product backlog items selected for the sprint, the what, and the actionable plan for delivering the increment, the how.
So it's the team's plan for the current sprint.
Exactly. It's a plan by and for the developers. It's highly visible, providing a real-time picture of the work they plan to accomplish. And it's updated throughout the sprint as more is learned. It needs enough detail so they can inspect progress in the daily scrum.
And its commitment.
The sprint goal. This is the single objective for the sprint. It's a commitment by the developers, but it also provides flexibility regarding the exact work needed to achieve it. It promotes focus and collaboration. It's created during sprint planning and added to the sprint backlog. If work turns out differently than expected, the developers collaborate with the PO to negotiate the scope of the sprint backlog without affecting the sprint goal.
Sprint goal provides focus for the short term. Got it. Final artifact. The increment.
The increment is the actual usable result. It's a concrete stepping stone toward the product goal. Each increment is added to all prior increments and thoroughly verified to ensure they all work together.
And it has to be usable.
Yes, crucially, even if the PO decides not to release it yet, it must be in a usable condition. A team might create multiple increments within a sprint. The sum of all increments is what's inspected at the sprint review.
Can you release an increment before the sprint review?
Absolutely. An increment can be delivered to stakeholders prior to the end of the sprint. The sprint review isn't a gate for releasing value.
Okay. And its commitment. This sounds important.
It is. The commitment is the definition of done, DOD. This is a formal description of the state of the increment when it meets the quality measures required for the product.
So it defines what finished actually means for a piece of work.
Precisely. The moment a product backlog item meets the DOD, an increment is born. It creates transparency by giving everyone a shared understanding of what work was completed. If something doesn't meet the DOD, it can't be considered part of the increment, can't be released, and can't even be shown at the sprint review. It goes back to the product backlog.
Who creates the definition of done?
If the organization has a standard DOD, all Scrum teams must follow it as a minimum. If not, the Scrum team must create a DOD appropriate for their product. Either way, the developers are accountable for adhering to it. And if multiple teams work on the same product, they need to mutually define and comply with the same DOD.
Definition of done. Sounds like the bedrock of quality and transparency for the actual product.
It really is. It prevents misunderstandings about whether work is truly complete.
Okay, that covers the artifacts and their commitments. As we sort of get towards wrapping this up, the Scrum Guide itself has an end note, which seems pretty direct. What's the key takeaway there?
Yeah, it's very clear. It states that Scrum is free and offered as defined in the guide. The framework, as outlined the roles, events, artifacts, rules, is immutable.
Immutable, meaning you can't change it.
Well, you can, but then it's not Scrum anymore. Implementing only parts of Scrum is not Scrum. Scrum exists only in its entirety. It functions as a container for other techniques and practices, but the core framework needs to be there.
So no Scrum, but we do Scrum, but.
Exactly. The guide explicitly calls that out. If you're modifying the core elements or not implementing them, you're doing something else, which might be fine, but it isn't Scrum.
And it's important to remember where this came from, right?
Absolutely. Ken Schwaber and Jeff Sutherland first presented it way back in 1995. The guide is the result of over 30 years of their learning and refinement. While lots of other books and resources can complement Scrum, the guide itself is the definitive definition, and they give credit to the early companies who helped prove its effectiveness.
Okay, so let's try to pull this all together. This deep dive, based right on the Scrum Guide, shows us Scrum is, well, it's a lightweight framework,
Based on empiricism, learning through experience, and lean thinking, cutting waste.
driven by those 5 core values: commitment, focus, openness, respect, courage.
Implemented by a specific unit, the Scrum Team, with 3 distinct accountabilities: developers, product owner, Scrum Master.
Who work in cycles called sprints, which contain specific events for planning, synchronization, inspection, and adaptation. Sprint planning, daily Scrum, sprint review, sprint retrospective.
And it all revolves around 3 transparent artifacts, each with a clear commitment. The product backlog with its product goal, the sprint backlog with its sprint goal, and the increment tied to the definition of done.
We got all that straight from the source, from the creators themselves, via the guide.
That was the goal, yeah. To give you, the listener, that foundational understanding of what Scrum is, according to its definition.
So for you listening, hopefully that provides a really solid base. Now, maybe think about how these ideas, transparency, inspection, adaptation, the focus on value, continuous improvement, how could they apply to the complex challenges you face?
Yeah, that leads to maybe a final thought to chew on. Now that you have this foundational definition of Scrum, what specific complex problem in your world, in your work or life, could maybe benefit from this kind of adaptive, transparent, value-focused approach?
Exploring that might just be your next step.